So a dear friend of mine called May 28th of this year, and he asked me if I was available to help a good friend of his out. Okay, um, what can I do? It was about an hour later after that call that I was put in contact with Tamaris and on a conference call while she was out of town, and she explained what she needed. She needed somebody to evaluate a case and to basically validate the complaint.
Hi, Tony. I'm Tamaris. Tamaris Hennigan, and I am currently an attorney in Lenawee County, and I'm native of Lenawee County. I grew up here. I was here until I was about 16 years old when I went into the foster care system, kind of got moved all around the state, and life for me really changed a lot. I wasn't able to complete high school when I wanted to because I kept getting moved all around and I was away from family and friends and all of those things that teenagers are used to. And life took me on quite a journey where I got to learn a lot of life lessons. I got to grow a lot, but pretty much any and everything that a teenager could ever complain about, I can say, been there, done that. From being in foster care to having a biological father who was a drug addict and absent from my life most of the time. Uh, Cool fact, my mom's in a cult. And so that was always fun dealing with. I had a teenage pregnancy. I almost died in a drive-by when I was 18. Uh, and From there, I grew up and became a mom. I now have 9 kids in a blended family. But long before that, I went back to school, got my GED, went to college. And during college, my biological grandfather, who was my absolute hero, passed away and he left quite a legacy. And so, in that, um, I decided that it was time for me to move back to Lenawee County to help one, complete my dreams, and two, to carry on his legacy. So I moved back here in 2012 and I've been back here ever since. So about 12 years now, I've been back in Lenawee County. So, and it was my dream to become an attorney and one day a judge. So I moved back here while I was going to law school and then opened the first Black owned law firm in our county. I also was honored to become the first African American attorney ever to be sworn into the Lenawee County Bar and the first Black city attorney. And I continue to run my law practice, and now I'm the first minority to run for judge in Lenawee County. That's me. Oh, and in the meantime, I'm got 9 kids, so I stay busy. And a dash hound, which is important.
So you're talking about aspirations, and you're running for a judge, probate judge, to be back.
Probate judge.
So what happened?
So I've always wanted to be a judge ever since I was a child. In fact, the building that I'm in right now, where my law office is, I used to walk past it going to and from school every day in middle school. And it was a law office back then as well. And I would always think when I grow up, I'm going to be an attorney in a building like that. It's just something that's always been innate in me that I knew this was what I wanted to do. And I always knew I wanted to be a judge because I wanted to help people. To be honest, I always thought I would be a judge in circuit or district court because I thought that I always wanted to be involved with criminal law. And that's what my specialization was in law school. And after law school, or at the end of law school, I worked in the prosecutor's office as an intern and then went into defense work. So I just really thought criminal law was going to be my spot. But a few years ago, I had the opportunity to start doing some contract work for the public defender's office in probate court and taking on cases that were for juvenile delinquent cases and or abuse and neglect cases. So in the juvenile cases, I represent the child and help them resolve whatever trouble they've gotten into and hopefully get them back on the right path so that it doesn't impact their life for too long. In the abuse and neglect cases, I represent the parents. And I started to see that there's some flaws in our system. And there's also some parents out there that just needed some help, but really had the ability to become great parents and maybe just came from a background like me where they didn't have the examples and role models to teach them how to do that. And so the system was a way for them to get the resources they need to learn to be better parents and fix families. And then sometimes there were cases where those parents maybe can't be fixed, but those kids are in a situation like I was. And so those families still needed support so that the kids could get into a stable situation. So I started those cases, and now I also do cases where I'm a guardian ad litem for about 35 or 40 kids in Wayne County, and I get to represent the best interest of the kids. So in doing that, I realized that while I always wanted to be a judge, probate court was my passion. It was the place I could make the biggest impact because I could not sympathize with the people who are coming before that court, but I actually can empathize with them. And I think that it's really important to be able to understand the positions that they might be in and how that genuinely impacts their life if you're going to be making decisions that are life-altering decisions for them. So when I realized that that was my passion, I made the decision that probate court would be the court that I would run for. That being said, our current judge's term is up at the end of this year, and she's been on the bench for one term, which is 6 years, and it hasn't been a pleasant experience for most of us here in Lenawee County, especially in the legal profession or those who've had to work directly with the court. And so people started asking around, trying to find attorneys that were willing to run against this judge to see if we could get a change in our probate court. So not many people step to the plate. In fact, election has begun right now, and we're doing absentee ballots, and election day is November 5th, and I'm the only one who has stepped to the plate so far. So that being said, I decided to take on the challenge, and I've pursued that, and we'll see what happens at the end of this election. But it's time for a change in our particular court, and it's time for our families to get the service that they deserve. So this was the opportunity to step up and show that I'm built for this and that I can make a change in our community and bring a positive light back to probate court.
So of the entire situation here, you're running against this this judge, and there was a problem with ballots, with getting you on the ballot. And this judge has actually something to do with this,
Yeah.
ironically enough. Let's start there. So what happened?
So actually back in October of 2023, I approached the judge privately to let her know that I was going to be putting my hat in the ring for judge this year. It's a professional courtesy that I think that was the correct and mature thing to do. So I went to her and let her know that, and her response was, good luck on your ballots. Or I'm sorry, good luck on your petitions. So petitions can't even get picked up until after the first of the year in January, but I was announcing early so that I would have plenty of time to get my campaign going. And so when January came, I picked up my ballots and we went out and collected signatures. In fact, we collected signatures during the big ice storm that we had this year when there was no electricity everywhere. So people were sitting tight because there was no electricity. So signatures were pretty easy to get. So we went out and collected all those signatures and turned them in February. And the county clerk got back to me at the beginning of March, let me know that they had validated my signatures and that I could go ahead and register with the Secretary of State to be placed on the ballot. And so we did that. And a few weeks later, we were notified by the county clerk's office that they had received a phone call. It was in April. They received a phone call stating that my petitions were going to be challenged. Now, an official challenge couldn't take place until the end of April because there are timelines within the statutes, but they were informed that a challenge would come and that this individual was going to challenge a correction that had been made at the top of my petitions. When we initially filled out all of the blank petition forms, the clerk directed us to put the November 5th date where it said election, and we did that. And the clerk later realized that that was not the correct instruction and asked us to change that date to, I believe it was August 6th for the primaries. And we did make those changes and initial those changes, even though there wasn't going to be a primary race. There was only myself and the current judge that were going to be on the ballot, but still that date had to be there in order for the petitions to be correct. So we did that under the instruction of the clerk and with their permission. So the caller said that they were going to challenge that because they challenged the clerk's authority to be able to allow changes to be made on a petition. It's my understanding that for the 15 years that clerk has been in office, they've always been told by the state of Michigan that so long as they treat all candidates equally, that if there's a mistake, they can allow those corrections so long as they would do it for any and all candidates. And that is their policy. So that's why they had allowed it. All that being said, it was about 12 days before the deadline to have nominating petitions in. And so in order to make sure that that potential challenge would not become an issue, I withdrew from the race that day and began collecting signatures again. And we corrected the form so that we would avoid any issue. And we collected another 500 and it was a 540-ish signatures, which was even more than we had collected the first time. And we turned those in by the deadline. So we collected our signatures twice, a total of over 1,000, I believe it was, when we only need 400 signatures, 400 valid signatures to run here in Lenawee County. So they all got turned in. And as soon as the final day came that a written challenge could be filed, my opponent's brother-in-law filed a challenge and alleged 3 different things. They alleged that I had not properly withdrawn the first time, and therefore there should be some type of issue with the counting of signatures. They alleged that I had fraudulently submitted signatures, and they alleged that I forgot that I had not turned in a campaign finance report from 2021 when I ran for city commission. It was a final campaign finance report. And when you register with the clerk, you sign a document called an affidavit of identity. And on that affidavit of identity, there's a statement that says that you swear as the candidate that everything that is on that document is truthful. And it asks you, has everything been turned in for your campaign? And I had said yes, that it had, and I had signed that document. So they alleged that I fraudulently submitted an affidavit of identity because my campaign finance form had not been turned in 2021. I had missed that and didn't even realize that it wasn't in. The county clerk, had also missed it both times that they certified my signatures this spring. And so none of us were aware that that document was missing. In my effort to respond to that challenge, I did come across case law that back in 2022, this became an issue that many candidates were facing, and the Secretary of State was enforcing this statute very firmly. And someone else who had been running for judge took the issue to the Michigan Court of Appeals and lost that issue, and was not allowed to have their name pre-printed on the ballot because they had made a mistake and thought that all of their paperwork was in when it was not. So instead of creating some big fuss and suing the county and wasting everyone's time and energy, I just chose to acknowledge that I had made a mistake and accept responsibility for that. I did get the paperwork in that needed to be in. And then I chose to take my campaign to a write-in campaign rather than just giving up and walking away and waiting 6 more years until the position came open again. So here we are running a write-in campaign. The clerk issued a letter saying that I had conceded that I had not turned in my paperwork from 2021, whether that was inadvertently, whatever, but I conceded to that. And therefore, my name would not be pre-printed on the ballot and the investigation was closed.
Okay. So who made the complaint? Who filed the complaint?
Well, the complaint was filed by a gentleman who lives in Manitoba Beach or Addison, Michigan, next door to the home that the current judge owns, next door to the house that the current judge owns, and lives in her father's home. So I'm assuming as a tenant, and he is now her brother-in-law. So she was slated to be married in July of this year, which she did get married, and this individual is her brother-in-law. Better. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I think it's kind of important to backtrack a tiny bit because everything overlapped right then.
Mm-hmm.
So I already had this information and knowledge that people were telling me that Catherine didn't live in our county. And so I started looking into that on my own, like around the first part of the year after the holidays, because what happened is I was going to events all over town, all over the county, and people were saying, "Oh, you're running against her. I heard you're running against her. Did you know she doesn't even live in our county?" And so I started doing a little digging on my own because this is a small town and rumors spread like fire, and who knows if that's even true. So I started to dig into that like in February, March timeframe. And then at the end of March, no, in the middle of March, I met a professional private investigator. And we started to communicate via email about what this would look like if I hired him to do a professional investigation, because what I had found so far was leading me to believe that the rumors might be true. So then on April 2nd, I actually retained the private investigator, and then he started his process. So it was 30 days after that that my petitions were challenged. So it's a really important overlap because she likes to present it as I started this investigation purposefully because she got me kicked off the ballot and that the investigation was retaliatory. The investigation was started prior to any challenge ever happening. So that investigation continued for April and May. And then as the end of May was coming, he wrapped up his initial report. And that report had to do with mostly the paper trail, the background checks, the aliases that he was looking into, different things like that. And so then it concluded with a recommendation of what steps should be taken next. So his report, his certified report, stated that it wasn't likely that Catherine lives in Lenawee County, but the ways that that could be verified are as follows, and he kind of gave a full checklist. So it was at that time that I decided to reach out to you guys to have what I've referred to in all my briefs now as a ground surveillance team to follow up on the recommendations that were given by the first investigative report. And so then you guys stepped in right after Memorial Day weekend at the end of May and began the process there. While you were doing your stuff, I was also still doing things in the process to prepare for the anticipated lawsuit because I also I wanted to go to the county to see if they wanted to take this on themselves. So I took the initial report from Investigator Butler to the county. And then I also had to reach out to the Attorney General to ask them if they wanted to be the ones to file the lawsuit, because that was a statutory requirement. And I had to wait for a response from them. So I went to the county and the Attorney General about the second week of July. And then you guys were wrapping up at the end of July, and a few days into August, after getting your report, I then got the kind of thumbs up from the Attorney General, and 2 weeks later filed the lawsuit.
So day one, we began our skip. And what that entails is we start diving into the information provided to us and seeing what results we come back with. And we're talking from utility bills or any public records that you may have out there. We start looking for leads. And what we found was the judge's address, showing current at the Devil's Lake address in Addison. However, next to it was another address, and it was a Grass Lake address. And the dates on it show going back to 2017. And then it looked like there might have been a change of address put in 2018. And when you look at the record, the time length, it kind of looks like it was done intentionally to run for probate judge. Now, that's just what it looks like. I mean, it may not be what it is. Remember, we always got to keep an open mind and non-biasness when we're doing these types of things. But a lot of information was coming back that definitely rose some flags to us. In fact, that we had to pull up some quick claims, deeds on the property.
With Tony one day, and he handed me a bunch of papers and asked me to review them. Turned out that they were a bunch of deeds, and in my background many years ago, I used to work for a title company and run deeds to make sure everything was clean and clear. And I just started coming up with a ton of different questions that started arising more aspects of other stuff going on besides just what we started with. And he said that he also had a bunch of other professionals in that same line come up with the same questions, if not more in depth on other things as well.
And we started investigating that as well. Not questioning whether the judge owns the home. I mean, you can own any house, but do you live there 100% of the time? Now, that's the question that we are trying to get an answer to. So, we go out our first time. What we called a recon mission. We wanted to go out, check out the area, go find the house of the judge, and just take a look to know what we're looking at, get an idea of the area and the surroundings. We first pulled up to the judge's home on Devil's Lake.
It wasn't, no one was living there. There's no there wasn't any flowers. It was very stark. The appearance was very stark. Just.
It didn't look like somebody lived there. It looked like it was like a summer cottage, like you would have on a lake. The difference, though, is it was minimum maintenance, and honestly, when you have a house around a lake, even if it's just a summer cottage, you usually have some flowers out there, you have it done up, it looks nice and it's comfortable. This, though, is quite the opposite. That again now raises more flags. And we realize at that point, we definitely need to keep ground surveillance on the judge's home. So what ended up happening is we ended up meeting up with Tamaris at the end of our recon mission at a really cool place in Ann Arbor for some drinks, and we talked. And that was when we discovered that this whole case is without malice. There's nothing negative towards the probate judge, the current judge, Catherine Sala. It is the fact of what she did to cause where we're at now. And out of transparency, I felt that we needed to do this.
So the first night that we arrived for the recon, when I was starting to become involved in the groundwork, we stayed at Cowboy Town. Cute place, by the way. Love the whole vibe, the whole theme. Everything's fantastic. Just a really cool place. Rustic. We showed up there to do the trail cam first, and just because we wanted to see what was going on when we weren't fully able to be around to see the house, what was going on when
So
no
going
one was
forward,
looking.
Here's what we needed to do. We needed to, A, get a trail cam installed. B, set up weekly long surveillance. And C, if all else fails on finding the judge at her home for any reason, we would then look at the alternate address that we had come up that showed back as far back as 2017. So we needed to take some time. We ended up going down multiple times and driving around a lot of time, keeping an eye on the judge's home. Luckily, she's right next to the highway, so us driving through, we could visually see it, which also worked out really good from when we did the trail cams. We ended up staying out there for a week-long surveillance, plus to retrieve the trail cam that we had left out there for almost a month or so.
So the trail cam. The trail cam was a fun one. That night, trying to get a good view. Not always possible.
We went out to Adrian and ran over to Addison and got the trail cam. Let me tell you, installing that sucker was a lot of fun. It was late at night, and here I am walking down the road, the highway there, and jumping over the guardrail right onto the state easement area, and found a tree area to put the trail cam on. Problem with doing such a thing is you do have some things that will block you and your vision. And we found that to be the case. We did not expect the winds to be all the time like they were, plus thunderstorms and other things and weather related that came through the area.
The weather, the tree branches, something moves, something gets in the way. What we did find from those camera pictures was just a lot of...
was causing the young tree that we had attached to kind of go all over the place. So we got some visuals of the judge's home. However, it wasn't really helpful for what we needed. And because of those results, it forced us to basically step up and really cover the surveillance. And we're talking all times of the day. We're talking in the middle of the night. We're talking in the mornings, weekends, afternoons, evenings, all the times that anybody normally that lives at a place that's 100% homestead is going to be there.
Does anyone really live there? If you're gonna... If that's your residence, that would be somewhere that the neighbors would see you all the time. And from what we saw when we were there, the neighbors weren't seeing you because you weren't there. You had to be somewhere else. You're living somewhere else. There's no way that anyone is actually living in that house daily.
But it was a lot of driving. From where we were staying in the hotel to Devil's Lake and to all the surrounding area. During the time that the judge was at work, of course, we are out in the county, in the area, going around, familiarizing ourselves with it, looking at the different roads, taking the different roads.
And what we ended up finding was, well, nothing. Which for us was a good thing. Nothing meaning no activity. Does anyone really live there? Like, Okay, we get it. You're supposed to have this house as your legal residence and be there 90% of the time or whatever the equation is supposed to be. What we found was nothing. No one was there, no lights, no nothing. If my biggest problem with it was, okay, you're a dog owner, and I'm a dog owner, so I know what it's like to do that and to have and we have the same breed. So understand, I know your activity very well when it comes to that animal. You have to have that animal with you constantly. You have to be there all the time, no matter what. Like that's an animal that gets a little sassy when they're upset with you. But what we did find was, not even to let out a dog, to open a window, to nothing. There was nothing there.
A lot on the road. And I can't emphasize that enough. So many miles, so much time during our window of this investigation that it was at a point of, we aren't seeing her. She is not at this home. And we would go to her work, and there's her car in the parking lot of the court in her VIP spot there. And that was the only time we were seeing the car.
Man. But that's okay. Trial and error. Everything is, you keep going, you keep looking, you keep investigating because, well, why would this be possible? Why is it an issue? Well, maybe we need to delve deeper into that. Maybe she was just gone or not.
We said enough. And we decided to adventure up to the other address that we had found in Grass Lake.
To the other house, which we'll talk about that one later.
So, hey guys, it's Tamaris, and I had a really busy week, but I'm really excited because this weekend is the opening of the show Young Frankenstein at the historic Croswell Opera House. It is the oldest theater in Michigan, and this year I became a part of the Croswell family and started performing there. So this is my second show this year. I am in the ensemble, and I'm just enjoying kind of hanging out in the background, doing a little singing and dancing. It's my hobby that helps me keep my sanity, or whatever sanity looks like these days. So if you don't have anything else to do the next 2 weekends, we are doing shows this week, Friday, double show Saturday, and one on Sunday. And next week, I believe we do Thursday, Friday, double shows on Saturday and one on Sunday. So come on out and check it out. And it's a beautiful theater. It's going to be a great show.
We aren't seeing her. She is not at this home. And we would go to her work, and there's her car in the parking lot of the court in her VIP spot there. And that was the only time we were seeing the car. It wasn't until after everything, all the time on the road, all the miles, and all the watching a property that was empty, for lack of better words, not being used, treated much like a cottage on the lake, except for kind of Drury. We said enough. And we decided to adventure up to the other address that we had found in Grass Lake. And it was at that moment when we rolled down that road and when we saw what we saw.
In July, the ground surveillance team was here for several days, coming into Adrian for several days, so they could do some close surveillance and really kind of see if we could wrap up this investigation and get some answers. And so it was actually during our fair week, and I had a crazy week, very, very busy. Needed to go to the fair, obviously, and get out and see people from all over the county. I also had court several days that week, and it is also my youngest child's birthday during fair week. So he was turning 11, and we had to do his birthday party and celebration, and still I had to work, be a mom, and keep working on the campaign and stay in touch with the team because they were very, very busy that week. So every day that week, I got to go and meet up with the team and kind of see where their plans were for the day, what they thought they were going to do as far as surveillance and what they hoped to find. And then we would kind of meet again later in the day, maybe, and debrief and see how things went, and then make a plan for the following day. So it was exhausting week, but yet good to know that things were finally moving forward and hopefully getting wrapped up. So I believe it was the second or third day that we were meeting regularly that I was going to the Lenawee County Fair that evening to, one, do some campaigning, but two, my sister and I have a tradition of going to get fair food. And so we had booked that as our night to get fair food. And we also were planning to go to the 90s throwback concert because we're 90s kids, 80s and 90s kids. So we were excited about that. We were going to see Tone Loc, who my sister and I had been on stage with before up in Detroit at the casinos. And we were going to see a lot of other people. They were doing the Humpty Hump. They had CC and the Music Factory and oh gosh, who are the ones that the I Want to Sex You Up guys? Only one of them is still there, and they're not looking like sexing anybody up anymore. But whatever the case may be, we went to the concert and we were hanging out there. And while we were at the concert, I started to get text messages from the surveillance team.
And it was at that moment when we rolled down that road and when we saw what we saw. I was beside myself.
The first time showing up to the Grass Lake address, that was interesting. After spending so much time at the other location, at the other house, it was one of those, okay, there you are.
I think it was just absolute relief. It's about time. They were all over the place that night trying to figure out where in the world is Catherine Sala.
But now we got to find out, are you just there, visiting, hanging out, or is it something more? What we ended up finding out, the more and more we looked and the more and more we surveilled, was this is where you're living. That's not cool.
I really agreed with the comments that the one comment that was in the final report that said something to the effect of never seen anyone work so hard to not be found. And that's how it felt for all of these months. That why is it so difficult? Why are there so many? Why does it seem like so many things are being done to avoid being found? I can't imagine being in my 40s and not having a car in my name for years. Like, that's just odd. The next day, we all reconvened and met to discuss, what are the next steps going to be. We're going to start wrapping up this investigation. We were still waiting for the answer to come back from the Attorney General's office, because I had sent out our request there to follow the proper steps in the statute, asking them if they wanted to take action, because I'm not eligible to file a lawsuit unless the Attorney General turns it down and basically leaves it in my hands if I would like to file. So we were waiting for that, and I was calling them over and over because it had been about 3 weeks already since I had sent it to them. And we knew that the timeline is obviously, it was crunch time. So eventually, after that meeting, I was able to get a hold of them and kind of get things moving a little more quickly. And also that day, I received a message from one of our anonymous sources saying, hey, we have reached out to someone that we know with the Michigan State Police, and we've asked them to kind of review the situation and see if there's anything that they can do to investigate, because this is a crime. It's a felony to lie on your affidavit of identity or affidavit of candidacy. And as she has so many times tried to state about me, that she feels I should have been charged with a felony for forgetting a piece of paper. So this is obviously much more deliberate than forgetting to turn in a piece of paper. So I received a message that I would be hearing from the state police early the following week to see kind of what they thought should be done with it as well. So I think that weekend I spent a lot of time working on things and working on what the actual court documents, what we were going to file, putting together exhibits and so on. A couple of days after that, when you guys sent me your report, I also had contact with the Attorney Generals, and they told me that I could send the second report over to go along with the first investigative report that we had done. And so I did forward that to them as well and received confirmation that they had received it. So then fast forward a few days as we anxiously waited to hear from the AG's office, they finally responded to us around August 12th, I think it was. And they said, we've received your information, we've reviewed it all, and we're not going to address it at this time. And I kind of put that in quotes, like at this time, because in putting this together, this filing together, we had to look at other cases that were filed for the same type of action for quo warranto. And everybody who wants to file a quo warranto has to ask the Attorney General first before they can actually go forward with that. So each one would receive a letter, and the letters would say different things. And so once there was one that said, hey, we're not going to file this, but we feel like it's because this is a county issue. So we're going to let the county handle it themselves. So you do it if you want to. Sometimes it would just be, we're not going to file at all, or we don't see any merit. But in this case, it was, we're not going to do it at this time. So, of course, you know, we wanted to figure out, what does that mean? We just kind of felt like maybe, one, it's a presidential election with a bunch of drama going on and people challenging who can be on ballots all over the state, well, all over the country, really. And maybe they just didn't have time for this right now. But also, we felt maybe they thought the election is in like 90 days. And this person who's asking us to file says that she's running against her. If she beats her, we don't have a reason to file because that would solve the problem. But if she doesn't, then at this time may become actually at this time. And so first we had to wait for a judge because every judge in our county was going to recuse themselves, and we knew that. And that is the right thing for each and every one of them to do. And then once that's done, there has to be a request made to the state court administrator's office to assign a judge to the case. And it's a judge from out of county, obviously. So then we had to wait for that process to occur. Once we got all of that back, I believe it was September 4th or 5th that we finally got the documents back in hand. Then we reached out to a process server and said, can you please serve this for us? And the process server wanted to follow our lead and be discreet about this and just serve her private. So they contacted her and on her cell, I believe, and asked if they could drop the documents off to her. And it's my understanding that she replied that the documents could be served on her attorney. And she gave the contact information for her attorney, which was in Okemos, Michigan, up by Lansing. I think it's a little over 70 miles away from our county. So the process server showed up to my office Friday morning, prepared to drive to Okemos, and started calling the attorney at about 8:30 in the morning from our office and was not able to get a hold of him until I believe I finally called back about between 11 and 12 that morning, and quickly indicated to the process server that he wasn't trying to avoid service. And no one asked if he was trying to avoid service. So we thought that was kind of weird. But then he did go on to say that he wouldn't be in his office that day. So he couldn't accept service that day. He could meet on Saturday, but we weren't going to send our process server out on a Saturday. It did not get served that Friday. On Saturday, we went out on our own to attempt to serve. I took a third party with me because according to the law, I cannot serve the documents because I'm a party to the case. So I took another individual with me that was over the age of 18 and was eligible for to make service. And we went out to the Addison address and no one was there. We hung out in the Addison area for a few hours and went back by again and no one was there. We drove out to the Grass Lake address and we did not come across her out there that day either. And so we returned back to Adrian. The next day on Sunday, we tried again and I took someone with me that day as well, but we went much later in the evening because we were thinking that, you know, it's Sunday night and most people are going home, kind of getting settled in after dark because they've got work on Monday morning. So we thought we would try a different time of day. And so we went late Sunday night and still no luck. No one was at the Addison address. And so we chose not to make the trip out to Grass Lake that day. And instead, we said, well, we'll serve her tomorrow, because we know where you work at. And we've tried to, work with the attorney and do what you've asked, even though it was kind of a big ask for it to be served 71 miles away. But we tried that, didn't work. So we'll serve her. And she's coming and going from
When
work.
we first came into town, we went over to Devil's Lake to the home to see if there was any activity. There was cobwebs around the door and no sign of life.
So once Jimmy and Anthony went their way, Tamiris and I went to the courthouse and found a parking spot where we could view the employee parking lot. We knew we couldn't do it on the premises, but we were trying to see when she was going to be showing up for court. And from my understanding, she's phenomenal for never being on time for her own courts. And it can be very frustrating for people that have a life, and we can get in trouble for something, but she's not getting in trouble for it. So make that make sense. Finally, about 5 minutes before 10, her floor office windows open, or lights turned on. And so we're like, oh, okay, so she should be showing up soon. Never showed up. I'm sitting there in the driver's seat with the phone waiting to take a video of everything. And about 10:19 a.m., lo and behold, Judge Sala shows up. Everyone inside waiting on her. Nonchalantly walks in. So then we are like, all right, that's not going to work. So then Tamiris and I met up with Jimmy and Anthony elsewhere, and we came up with a plan of what else we could try to do. So then we waited around. Tamiris went and did what she had to do. And so Anthony, Jimmy, and I then drove around in the van waiting for lunchtime. Waited and waited. She never emerged. So we're like, okay, different plan. So then we went to Tamiris's law office and sat there and had a plan. And while we were there, she got an email from Judge Sala's attorney stating that if we wanted to serve him with the papers, we could. So we knew that Tamiris was going to email him them, but we wanted to make sure he physically had a copy of them in his hands, that he couldn't say that he didn't get it through email or something. So we commenced to go over to the attorney's office. Finally found the location, and I grabbed everything, had everything in order, walked in, introduced myself, said I was representing Tamiris Hennigan, and that we had permission to serve you for these papers.
You served all this, and I've got it. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what this is. This is, and I'm not going to look at this right now.
Right.
So I don't know what I'm. See attached proof of service addendum. Yeah, I got this. Hell, you can even take a picture of what you sent me. I don't care. I don't care. But I can't. What if I said, what's this? See attached proof of service. What the hell does that mean?
That's this part right here.
So in a complaint and list of documents included in the personal. Okay. Summons, complaint, for it, including exhibits. See, I don't know if all the exhibits are here. So copy. You're just going to have to sign that you gave this to me. Okay.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? I don't mean to be difficult, but I'm not going to go through this right now.
Okay.
And see, but you gave it to me.
Yep.
And you can say, this is what I gave him, and
Correct.
I'll look at it at some point.
All right.
And that way I'm not I just don't have time to look at that right now.
Okay.
So anyway.
All
I got
right.
it.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
He was denying signing something that he said he already got through an email, but he doesn't have time to go through all this. So I accepted his refusal and told him to have a great day, and I left. And we then met with Tamiris again, gave her the paperwork, and we have been having a great journey since then.
this was all going on a Monday or Tuesday that we were attempting to do personal service, but we had attempted to serve her starting from Thursday of the previous week. So the initial process server contacted her by phone that Thursday and asked if they could drop it off to her. At which time she requested that it be taken to her personal attorney in Okemos. So the next morning at 8:30, a Friday morning, that process server was here in my office with me, and they spent from 8:30 to 11:30 trying to get a hold of that attorney, calling and sending emails. And because they didn't want to make a drive to Okemos for nothing. Eventually, sometime between 11:30 and noon, that attorney called back and notified the process server that he would not be in his office that day. She could come out on Saturday if she wanted to. She was not available to do weekend service. So then we made multiple other attempts, both Friday and Saturday at both homes, and we're still unable to locate her. So that was when I reached out to you guys to come in and do it. So again, on Monday, it was later in the morning before we heard from her attorney via email, who then said, I'm in my office today. How about you just email me the documents and you can mail me out a hard copy? Well, you can't do that with people that you can't trust, because that would not be proper service. And they would have been able to argue that they did not agree to service by email, and therefore they would not have had to appear for the hearing. So instead, I did upload the documents so that you could have the convenience of having them in electronic format, but I didn't actually email them until you guys were not far out from the office, so that I knew that you could still get personal service and we couldn't have any discrepancies. It was my expectation that he was going to sign for service, because he had been telling us since Friday that he would accept service. And what was really strange is that he kept mentioning to the process server that they weren't trying to avoid service. I'm not trying to avoid service. Every time she would talk to him, he would say, I'm not trying to avoid service. No one asked him that, and here it was the first day that we were trying to make service, so why in the world would that be coming up is beyond me. Because even normally, if I contacted another attorney and said, can I serve something to you on behalf of your client, and it's Friday, and they say, I'll take it on Monday, that's not usually a big deal. So to say, you know, hey, I'm not in my office today, there was no reason for us to think right off the top of our head that they're trying to avoid service. It was kind of an odd statement to repeat over and over. So, and then like you said, we waited outside the courthouse. We weren't able to serve her there, so you guys went ahead and drove out to Okemos, and then I'll let Shannon pick up from there, because it's all her.
Yeah, once we got there, I got everything situated in order, went inside, introduced myself as a representative for Tamaris Hennigan, and that I was here to serve the documents that he had received by email as well. And I handed him the paperwork, he accepted it, but then he was refusing to sign for the proof of service, because he's like, there's too many documents, too many exhibits, that I don't have time to sit here while you stand here. And so once he started saying that, I then started recording the situation so that there was proof that he refused to sign for that, even though he got it through an email, that he could have looked at a lot of that stuff before we showed up.
Right. Well, and that itself was unusual in the legal field. It's unusual. We don't, if someone drops something off to our office, like, and Michelle's sitting at her desk and they say, this is for Tamaris, we're serving for her client, can you sign for it? Yeah, we do. We don't flip through every single page of it first to see. We go through it later, and if something's missing that's on the proof of service, we would reach out and contact them and say, hey, you're missing Exhibit C or something, can you shoot that over? But I don't know that I've ever before experienced in practice of law where someone made such a huff and puff about, I need to go through every single one of these, and I don't know what's here, and I'm not gonna sign for this because I don't know what's here. So it was just odd too.
In the past, when I've served, I really didn't have that issue. I mean, you get some of those belligerent ones that do want to, just because they have an attitude and try to prove a point. But typically, they're just gonna sign because you've already caught them.
Let's talk about the dogs, guys, because there's 3 of 5 of us here, right, that are dash hound parents. Okay. And dash hounds are some of the most psychotic dogs when it comes to being with their owner all the time. When I do leave my dog at home, she sits in the window the entire day, even though there's other humans in the house. She sits in the window to wait for me because she's not for it. But also, if a leaf blows through the yard, she starts barking like a nut. This is just what they do. And they have very distinct barks. And so people who are dash hound owners, when you hear another dash hound barking, you know that it is. I've had people come into our office, hear my dog from another room and say, there's a dash hound here somewhere. You just know. And so she owns 2 dash hounds and actually provided pictures of them in the response and an affidavit from the neighbor who says that he goes over there to take the dogs out all the time. I want to say that he said every day, but I'm just going to go with all the time. It was a very, very often. And of all the people who've gone to this house to observe, no one's ever seen a dog.
Not one bark.
Not one, okay, that's what I was going to say. Not one bark when you pull up. I don't care if you drive past the house and turn around and come back, no bark, no bark
dog
when,
toys outside.
no dog toys, yeah, no
First
poop
thing-
piles, exactly. And no one was barking at you when you went to do service.
And that's the other thing, is
Yeah.
the one thing I looked at on the ground when I was walking up with the grass along the side is you're always going to see a piddle spot somewhere on the lawn. You cannot
You
escape
can tell the
them.
yellow spot, just
Yeah,
to be
the piddle
specific
spot.
of what the
And-
piddle spot
and
is.
it doesn't
if you're
matter
not
if
a
it's
dog
a
owner.
female or male, they'll do the same thing
Yeah.
with the corners, they'll do them on property marks and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I can see, I mean, I can't really hold down, I know she pays this exuberant amount with all these invoices from now into the future, that she supplied, but, or blanks or whatever that was, that she sent in the stuff back. It doesn't matter how good of a lawn service you have,
It
you
doesn't
are not
matter.
gonna get rid of that.
Right.
I have
You
lawn
have to-
service and I've got piddle spots.
Yeah, you gotta water the heck out of it, you gotta like drown out that spot, try to even get any grass to come back.
Unless you're also paying for grass paint.
Right, grass paint,
Who
right.
does that?
Right, or you have a special turf spot for the dogs
Right.
that won't discolor.
Right.
And
And while our trail cam video was not as great as we wanted it to be, you can see movement of vehicles and so on and so forth. And nowhere in there have you guys seen a wheelchair going back and forth from one house to
No.
another and dogs running out of the house. But yet we have this affidavit that says that this gentleman who's in a wheelchair actually goes over every day and lets the dogs out. He doesn't feed the dogs because she does that herself when she comes home. Yet we don't see him in his wheelchair. We don't see the dog running around, and we don't see either of her vehicles coming in and out in the evening at a time when the dogs would be fed.
Right.
So it's not adding up.
so now, now that we've gotten all this done, what's going on next? What's happening with this case now that the evidence is all put together and moving forward?
So we had a second hearing, and we're still waiting on a written opinion from the judge. The hearing was twofold. It was partially my motion for special leave to file what we call the quo warranto, to ask that she be removed from the bench because she's not a qualified elector in our county. That type of motion requires a judge to grant you permission to file it. So we're waiting for the judge to say yes or no as to whether or not she feels I met the legal requirements to make the filing. Also on that day, there was the defendant's motion to seal the record because she wanted all of this information to not be available to the public, because flat out what they said was that I would probably put it on my Know Who's Judging You website, and they're damn skippy, I will. So but I will not do that without having a ruling from the judge, because I abide by court rules and that's it. So since she filed that motion, I have withheld from uploading those documents and making them available to the public. During that hearing though, the judge did state that the records were public records, the documents were public record, and they could be obtained by anyone. There were a couple of things in those public records that maybe make people uncomfortable, but doesn't necessarily mean it's not public. And so, while the judge indicated that, you know, it was likely that the record couldn't be sealed, maybe we could discuss redaction, I wanted to be cooperative. You know, there's not, all of this is public record, so anyone can go pull it. It does not harm my case if I say I'll redact some of this information out to make it a little bit harder for someone to find. Let them go fish it out themselves if they want it. So I volunteered to redact, I believe it was, if there was any place that had her date of birth, social security number, which a lot of this was already redacted, just not fully redacted. So it would be maybe a couple of numbers of the social security, but everything else had stars and so on. We also agreed to redact VIN numbers and license plate numbers affiliated with cars that she drives. That was mostly because she doesn't own those cars, and so more so as a courtesy to the people who do own the cars. No point in having that there. The judge can see it on her copy. It doesn't need to be public record. And, and her personal cell phone number. The judge was very concerned about the personal cell phone number of another judge being public. If you're from here, you know that most of us attorneys here, we give out our personal cell phone numbers, and this is the same number that she had while she was practicing. I'd say she's probably had it a minimum of 10 years, but it's a number that's well known, and if you just Google it, it pops up. However, I can understand how another judge might feel that way, and so I did offer to redact the personal cell phone number as well. Ultimately, though, once I sat down with investigative reports, I made a choice to voluntarily redact some other things as well. So I just sent that over to her attorneys because we heard from the judge a couple days ago asking for a stipulation in order, which is basically an agreement between both sides about what will be redacted, meaning that once we sign that, the judge will not even have to rule on that motion because the parties have come to an agreement. So then we're just waiting on her to rule on my motion. So I sent the documents over to one of her attorneys that I had redacted, and then I included a list of what I redacted. And I highlighted what I had previously agreed, which was 4 different items. But I believe the list included 12 items by the time I sent it over. And what I chose to do was to redact the Jackson County address, because if we are in fact able to show that she does not live where she claims that she lives in Lenawee County, there's no need for people to be harassing her in Jackson County. You know, let her live her life. That's where she lives, that's where she lives. So I did redact that, including the city and zip. I did redact her husband's name from anywhere within those documents so that people who are not personally affiliated with her do not have to have her husband's name out there. I also redacted identifying information for her husband, all VINs and license plate numbers of cars that he's owned, because there was a long list of those. And I think that was mostly it, but it was just kind of broken down into every single thing. And then I indicated to the other attorney that that was a gesture of good faith on my part, because while it seems to have been forgotten from their side that prior to this lawsuit being filed and prior to any challenges to the ballot, that there were people on their team on my husband's Facebook page, and they were taking all kinds of snapshots and information about his career and dates that he had coming up and so on and so forth. And all of that was submitted with their challenge. But they didn't seem to think that was stalkerish in any way, shape, or form. And for me, my husband has some very delicate medical things going on. And so had he gotten really wound up about that, it really could have been harmful to his health. And so looking at that from the perspective of a wife, no matter what my career is, her husband didn't sign up to run for election. I'm not gonna say he didn't sign up for this, because he damn well knows where she lives, but he didn't sign up to run for election. So as a gesture of good faith, and courtesy, I took the steps to remove his identifying information from those documents. As long as we're redacting, then let's just, do that as well. So we are waiting for the stipulation order to come back from her attorney and see if it's something that we can all agree on. If it is, then we'll both sides will sign that, and then we send it to the judge for signature. It becomes an order of the court.
All right.
And it's not a situation where the judge ruled on the favor of one side or the other,
Right.
but where the judge made a suggestion and we said, all right, we'll give that a try, and now we're trying to put together an agreement to follow that suggestion. So it's not a win for either side, it's just a compromise, I guess. And then in addition to that, we are now still waiting for the actual ruling on my motion, which will tell us yes or no whether or not I have permission to go forward and file the actual lawsuit. So we'll see when that comes.
Right.
That's where we're at now.
Time will tell.
See you next season.
Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to define crime. Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to define crime. Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to define crime. Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to define crime. Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to define